Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such an amazing and fun show for you this evening. Actor, TV, film, stage actor, and pilot Treat Williams is here with us. We're going to do some hangar flying, and I can tell you that his stories are just amazing and endless. Before we get started, again, I just wanted to let you know we are coming up to the end of this period's Fly to Win Challenge on SocialFlight. We are giving away a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset on March 1st, so be sure to get out there and fly. All you need to do is get the SocialFlight app or go to socialflight.com. When you have the app on your phone, you can fly anywhere, check in, get points, and even if you do that only once during the prize period, you are entered in to win that Zulu 3 headset. And in addition to that, of course, every time is a prize period. So as soon as we get past March 1st, we'll announce our next prize and keep going on from there. So be sure to check out socialflight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile apps. Now, on to tonight's guest. Treat Williams is an actor, writer, a passionate aviator who's appeared on film, stage, and television in over 120 credits. He first became known for his starring role in the 1979 musical film Hair, and also later starred in films of Prince in the City, Once Upon a Time in America, The Late Shift, 127 Hours, 1941, D.B. Cooper, and so many more, way more than we could list in this very brief introduction. I will say that his performances have earned him an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actor in HBO's The Late Shift, as well as nominations for 3 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Satellite Awards, an Independent Spirit Award, among others. He is here tonight because he is a pilot with a sincere love affair with aviation. He's been flying for over 50 years and has owned a bunch of different aircraft, including a Navajo Chieftain, a T6 Texan, and his current and perhaps ideal hangar stable of a Piper Cub and an Aztec. And his current roles include Chesapeake Shores, in which he does play a pilot, Blue Bloods, and We Own the City. I'm going to bring him on the line now. I can say that I am absolutely thrilled to call him a friend and so glad that he could join us again here tonight on SocialFlight Live. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some hangar flying here with actor Treat Williams. Let's get Treat here on the line.
Hello.
Hey, welcome so much, Treat.
Let's set the record straight. 4 Golden Globe noms, okay, buddy?
Oh my! Oh, geez. Oh,
I was nominated for New Star of the Year, and I lost to Ricky Schroeder.
Ricky Schroeder?
Yeah, he and John Boyd did a remake of The Champ, an old night, a silent, I know, years ago, and I lost to Rick Schroeder. It's one of the great.
I got to tell you, Treat, he'd never make it on the show.
One of the great disappointments of my life was losing to Ricky Schroeder, but always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Oh my, maybe that's why I didn't make the list.
Oh no, I don't know. I think they don't realize it. I'm not even sure that was a category at the time. New Star of the Year, went to a 7-year-old, so maybe I was well out.
Yeah, no, that definitely doesn't count.
Yeah.
Listen, we have talked about so many flying stories. I don't even know where to begin, but I will pick up on one thing, and that is when you were here last on the show, you just dropped this little bomb without even saying much about it, where you just sat there and said, "Oh yeah, and I went flying down to Cuba with Bob and Chris, and we had to dig out of you a little bit about this story." So I want to start there because I want the rest of the story as it goes on your Cuba trip before we even get further.
Well, I of course can't tell you the whole story, but I got a call from after we finished Once Upon a Time in America. Bob said, "Hey, I've been invited down to this film festival in Cuba. I know you fly. Might be easier for us because it's hard to get down there. You have to go through Canada. Would you fly us down if we got permission?" I said, "Sure." He said, "I'm going to ask Al Pacino." And he called me and said, "Al didn't want to go, so I'm calling Chris Walken." So me and Chris, I flew Chris down to, I think we flew down to Palm Beach area. And then Bob met us down there. And then we also took a woman that was sort of our caretaker in Cuba. And she said, "Could I take a few things?" And she tried to put her entire apartment in my Seneca. And we were loaded to the gills.
And this is
And
Bobby De Niro, by the way.
Bobby De Niro and Christopher
You're
Walken.
saying Bob, like it's Bob from down the street.
I had friends that used to say, "Oh, it's Bob now, is it?" But when you work with a guy for 2 months in Rome, on the set, and so, he's saving you from being lit on fire with a match, covered in gasoline for 4 days, you get close. So anyway, we went down to this festival, and we really had a great time. Cuba was bizarre because everything was pretty much stayed the same since 1958. So you go over to the Grand Hotel, and the pool. We all went to have drinks across the street, Grand Hotel, and the pool hadn't had fresh water in it for probably 15 years, and people were sliding down to the deep end where the rainwater was to get wet and cool down. And then one of the great conversation was when we stayed in one of the hotels, and all the rugs were getting worn and things couldn't get fixed. They were fixed. They're still driving 57 Chevys around. And one guy, I said, "Man, this high rise is fantastic. It must be so expensive, or you must know somebody to get an apartment like on the 20th floor." He said, "Oh, no, second and third floors, D floors in the place." I said, "Why are they the best floors?" He said, "Because the elevators haven't worked in 10 years. If you were on the 15th floor, you walked, But it was really a lot of fun, and we were treated very well. I mean, to have De Niro on your plane when you get out is kind of like a ticket to just about everything. It was a lot of fun, and it was good. We all got along well. Bob and Chris are pretty quiet, so we just enjoyed Cuba.
Did they like flying with you?
Yeah, I mean, they were like, they're like they're city guys. So being in the airplane was like, when do we get there? When do we get there? Does that telephone? I had one of those phones in the plane. It was I guess it worked with it was the earliest phone you could get in an aircraft. It was impossible to talk to anybody to get. But once in a while you'd get a tower, and he was trying to make phone calls on my. You had to call them up. I can't remember. You called them up, and then you gave them your number, and you had a number you gave them that was your number to charge it to. It was crazy, very difficult. But I thought it was really cool to have a phone in the plane.
You told me at one point that those guys considered you like the handy guy, being a couple city kids. You drove around with them?
We went to the beach, and I drove, and this lady who was I can't remember her name. She's very nice, and loaned us her car. And of course, if you had a car in Cuba, it wasn't a very good car. So of course, after a day at the beach on the way back, we had a flat tire, and I was like the father in Christmas Story, 6 minutes. I got out. I didn't have anybody saying, oh fudge, but I got out, fixed the tire in about 6 minutes, and I got back in the car and started driving, and it was very quiet. And then from the back of the car, Chris Walken says, "Tree, you really are an outdoorsy kind of a guy." So, they were city guys. They didn't fix flat tires, Chris was a dancer on Broadway named Ronnie Walken when he started. And, Bob was a very, very serious young actor that came out of a very good class, Stella Adler's class, and started working right away and doing wonderful work. But they were guys who didn't leave the city much. And if they did, it was like, going to Paris with a suitcase to see the world, but not fixing cars or flying airplanes.
And you were escaping out of the city during that. Is that the case?
No, I was actually, when Bob called me, I was in Los Angeles interestingly, when he called me, I was in Los Angeles doing a movie called The Men's Club, with Harvey Keitel and Roy Scheider and myself and a bunch of really good actors. Other names will come to me in a minute. And I was really not happy. I thought, I don't think this is going to be great. So I went to a place called Jetcopters at the airport in Van Nuys, and I got my commercial add-on rating in the Hughes 300. At the time, it was a Hughes. It's since been bought by the Glider Company. It's now, I forget the name of the German name. They made gliders, and now they own that helicopter. They have the rights to it. But I got the rating in that helicopter, and then started flying the Bell 206, and so I became a commercial helicopter pilot during that film. And I think by the time I flew Bob and Chris, I had the rating.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's
And I got crazy for helicopters. I started a company called SocialFlight. We flew for films and television and did a whole bunch of commercials. And unfortunately, my partner Henry lost his life. We were doing a music video for Meatloaf, and he was doing low-level stuff over a river into the sun, and he hit wires. So I shut the company down after 8 years. But that was, during that time, I was a part of this whole aviation community in California. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It seems from a lot of things that you told me, you even if there wasn't, you weren't flying directly at that time, you seem to bring aviation into your work and help coach other people. We had a lot of people that called in and asked us last time about other films like 1941, and you mentioned you taught some stuff to John Belushi then.
Well, it was interesting. Some of these guys don't really want to fly. They're a little scared of it. I told you Baryshnikov was scared to fly with me, so he didn't want to go. His girlfriend wanted to go, Jessica Lange, but he said, no, you can't go. I'm not going, you're not going. So, but I did, John and I had a big scene in I was in the sidecar and he was driving the motorcycle, but he said, would you teach, I don't know anything about what the controls do in the P-40. And I said, sure, pull back, it goes up, push forward, it goes down, push it left, push it right, and it'll go left and right. And I said, forget about the pedals, don't worry about that. Just you can fake it with the stick, that's enough. I'm not going to see your feet. But he was very grateful, and his airplane stuff was fun. Crashing on the main street, that was very exciting that night because they crashed a full-size model plane right down Main Street. We were at Universal Studios, so that was a lot of fun.
Oh my God! How did they do that?
The tank crew was the tank commander was Dan Aykroyd, me, Mickey Rourke, and John Candy. How's that for a gang? The guys who are watching, if you go to, just Google 1941 tank crew, Treat Williams, Mickey Rourke, or any of that, John Candy. There's pictures of us all hanging together. And everybody's got a thumbs up, and I've got a thumbs down. I played a guy named Stretch Tatarsky who hated eggs. That was basically my whole character, a guy who just hated eggs. I don't know why, but it was a lot of fun.
That must have been unbelievable. I mean, you have been.
I call that the kitchen sink movie. It had just about everybody and everything in it that you could ever imagine. Every character actor.
I love your fight scene in that.
The fight scene was fun. I think I was hit by every item you could possibly hit by in a fight. A chair, a bottle. I can't remember what else. I got knocked out good. Stretch Tatarsky. A lot of fun.
You were in so many films that do have an airplane in it, even if it wasn't like absolutely key. Did you bring a lot of kind of your own background to try to make things a little more realistic, whether it's DB Cooper or some of these other ones that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really do any flying per se. I was in airplanes, jumped out of airplanes. As a matter of fact, I just remembered that Nick Nolte threw me out of a DC-3 to my death in a film that was called Mulholland Falls. And I also was in Hair. I think I told you the story about hitting the camera with the C-130. I got 30 minutes of right seat time in a 727. When we were doing the shots for Cooper, we had the jet for the San Diego Padres painted up like the plane that Cooper, hijacked. And so I got to fly the right seat in 727. I thought that was pretty cool. But I didn't get to fly the DC-3. I was supposed to fly over to England for the D-Day anniversary a couple years ago, but my schedule on my show on Hallmark wouldn't allow it. And I was very disappointed. I really was excited about that. Took the ground school, knew all the numbers. I was very excited because that didn't work out. But one day I'll get that DC-3 ticket,
I'm sure someone's going to help you with that one.
I don't know, but yeah, the flying I did, the most dangerous flying I did. Now I look back on, I think I told you about this, was standing on the landing gear of a 172 or 182. I can't remember exactly, in a film called Flashpoint. with Chris. It was the country western singer Chris. It'll come to me. But Art Scholl was. I'm thinking names about pilots. Art Scholl was the great Art Scholl, who died, as you know, shooting on Top Gun. They strapped me into the airplane with wires, no parachute. They built a little wooden platform on the left landing gear strut of the Cessna, and then they tied me into the airplane, and we took off with me standing on the strut, and I did a fight scene with Art Scholl at 3,000 feet, and he said, "Treat, you got to stop. You're fighting me too much. I can't fly the airplane." And so we landed, and it was a beautiful landing. I was like, "Oh God, please don't bounce this thing." And we landed, and then they said, "Why don't you just taxi around?" And of course, when you see the film, the fight scene is all on the ground because the jerky camera makes it much more exciting than, in a smooth air at 3,000 feet. But that was something where I look back and say, what was I thinking? And then, of course, I had a fight scene with Bob Duvall in the biplane where I was attacking his car with the wheel, and the wheel was banging on the top of Bob Duvall's car, and Art Scholl and I, and it was a Stearman, and Art was in the front, which had been a spray bin for all the spray fluid, and they'd set up a set of controls for him up there. Whenever they were on, when they were doing anything that was really difficult, Art took over, and when it was just flying, I took over. So we were sort of, you've got the controls, I've got the controls kind of a thing. But that's a good sequence. That's actually a very exciting aviation sequence. So now I look back, I did do more flying than I think I did. So that was a lot of fun.
You have had your share of actual in-flight challenges, emergencies, incidents, things like that. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that have happened.
So we can call this "How Stupid Could I Have Been?" Part. This is like I learned about.
Your words, not mine.
I had to get a list. It's that bad. So okay, I'm gonna go through them, and I'm not gonna get too delving in, but So I used to take Steve Railsback, who played Charles Manson, wonderful actor, and we would go fly the Cub everywhere, and there was no radio in the Cub. And I was telling you about, I used to get the lights from Danbury Airport, the green light and the red light for landing, which I'd have to call them on the phone. I said, I'll be there at 2 o'clock, around 2 o'clock. And they said, okay, be 1,000 feet above pattern altitude, and we'll give you the lights. And I can't remember the lights, but green said you can land, and red was don't come here yet. But we did have it was an uncontrolled airport in New Jersey. I said, let's just put down here. And since I didn't have a radio, I did a standard pattern, and windsock was kind of flat, so I decided to land to the west, which is usually the way the winds come. And as I was touching down, there was a Cessna heading right for me. So basically, we were playing chicken on the runway of this single runway airport, and I just went. And the brakes on, as you know, historically, the brakes on a Cub are non-existent. They really don't work. So I thought, well, I've only got one thing I can do. So I just kind of veered off the runway and down into a soft, it's like a grass ditch, and ended up in the ditch. And Steve said, what are we going to do? I said, well, pick it up. Let's go. Let's get it. He picked the airplane up, pulled it back out of the ditch, and and left. It wasn't the other guy's fault. It was just two guys, without radios heading the wrong way. In an uncontrolled airport, these things happen. Okay, I'm going to list. I'm going to go through it. This is just great. That was the chicken. Yeah, that was that. Then of course the reason I got my instrument rating very quickly was coming back from Montauk, New York to Teterboro when I thought it was a nice summer night, and the weather came down and down and down, and I didn't have a plan B. I was really, thank God, I had WABC tower tuned in, which is just off of the approach end of, well, it's actually approach end of 19 and 24 at Teterboro. And by using the tower, I finally caught the airport and brought it in and said, and that next day, I started my instrument rating and decided not to fly and that stuff anymore. So that was one of those lessons where you say, you're lucky to be here. Don't do that again. Okay, let's see. Rutland to Teterboro in my Seneca, I had an engine implode on the way down, and I didn't know why or what happened, and it just just smoke and clunking, and so I shut it down and feathered it, and came into Teterboro and just landed and had it fixed at the FBO. I had to put a new engine in. And then a couple years later, with more hours on it, I was doing ILS approaches out of Rutland into Vermont with this kid who was a new pilot, just about to get his instructor's rating. And it was very, very cold. And that's a stupid thing to do with turbocharged engines. And again, my right engine imploded. And he just flipped out. He lost it. And I all of a sudden became John Wayne in The High and the Mighty. he was like, I was like, come on, kid, snap out of it. And I was like, it's okay. I said, watch this, we'll cut all the fuel off, we'll feather the prop, gonna shut off the mags, shut off the fuel. Look at that, we're still flying. Isn't this great? He's like, okay. He ended up flying Citation jets later on. But he was scared to death. He'd never experienced anything like that. He thought we were going in, because the engine makes a lot of noise when an engine kind of implodes on you. So that's another where I started to get a little bit kinder to my engines, because you're flying anywhere from 95 degrees down to 10 below, and you can't always get your engines heated up first or get in a heated hangar. So flying in the Northeast is tough on engines, and I was probably as tough as a young pilot, probably being a little too rough on the airplane. So those are the two implosions. And then flying to, and I didn't know anything about whether you had to declare an emergency or not if you shut an engine down. To me, it wasn't an emergency. So I was flying a guy to Rhode Island, and about halfway there over Connecticut, at 5,500 pitch black night, I just heard the engines going boom, boom, boom. And I thought, well, what is that? And I looked and I saw I had no oil pressure. And I said, I got no oil pressure. I know it. I check the oil every time I fly. So I went, well, no oil pressure. I want to save the engine. So again, will it fly, identify, verify, will it fly? It was flying good. So shut it down, feathered the engine. And I said to the tower, I said, listen, I've just shut down my right engine. I got an oil pressure issue, so I've shut it down. And he said, are you declaring an emergency? And I said, well, I'm not going to be going around. That's for sure. And when I landed, there were trucks. These guys hadn't had an event like this probably in 10 years. The first thing out of the guy's mouth was not, are you okay? It was, can I see your license and your medical, please? And I wanted to say, do you want to know if we're all right? Do you care? So I gave my license and medical, and we got it towed over to, I got it off the runway, which was hard because of the, the amount of thrust on one engine in the Seneca. I got it over to one of the FBOs, and I called up the next. I said, "Go ahead, just fix it." And I called the next day, and I said to the guy, "So what happened?" He said, "Well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble." And I said, "What do you mean you don't want to get me in trouble?" I said, "I had to shut an engine down because I had no oil pressure. Why would somebody get in trouble?" He said, "Well, your oil cooler was pierced." And I said, "Well, what pierced it?" He said, "Well, somebody left a wrench in your engine." And I said, well. And so he gave me the cooler and the wrench. And I went back to Teterboro, and I said to the FBO where I was keeping it, I said, "Hey, I had to shut an engine down. And, I lost all the oil pressure because there was a wrench in the engine." And the guy who ran the shop said, "Oh, yeah, that's Bobby. Bobby's having marital problems right now." I said, if I was taken off out of Rutland IMC, Bobby's marital problems could have gotten me killed. So I moved the plane the next day. That was the end of that joint,
Who got
But
the wrench?
that leads me to something interesting. When I was having trouble, this is a good lesson for all of us. I was having a lot of trouble with getting any power out of my left engine, or enough power. Turbocharger was working great. They checked it 3 or 4 times. I said, "Guys, I'm telling you, I'm not getting more than like 32 inches, and I'm getting 40 on my right engine. Why aren't I getting this compression?" They said, "We don't know. We've looked at everything. We tried everything." And I thought, you know what? I'm not a mechanic, but I'm going to look at it. I got on my back, and I opened up the cowl flap and looked up, and there was a hole in the flange, in the spread, right where the exhaust pipe leaves. So there wasn't enough pressure getting to the spinner on the turbocharger. And I was like, "Guys, there's a hole in my exhaust pipe." They go, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, look at that." So
You need new mechanics.
Well, that's the only time that ever happened. That's called trust but verify, I think. You know, that was really bizarre. And then I forgot to tell you, okay, last one. I had a turbocharger replaced in Salt Lake, and I flew down to see Pam and I flew to Seneca down to we were down in Las Vegas, McLaren, I think it's called, in Las Vegas. And it was, I thought it was working fine, and I was on final in front of like a 737, and the 737 says, "Hey, Tower, you want to tell that Seneca in front of me? I think he's on fire." And I looked back, and I could see that what was happening is the oil was being lit up by the heat of the exhaust, so it looked like I was skywriting. And I said, no, I'm not on fire. Somebody really did a bad job on a new turbocharger. It was just put in. I'd probably flown it an hour and 15 minutes. But all the guys came in the suits, so they looked like they were like men from Mars, you know. They all came around. Then they recognized me, and it was like a little party. They were all hanging out on the taxiway. So that was fun.
Treat Williams lands on fire, 737. I love that. That's awesome.
Used to say hi to Harrison Ford. Like, that was one thing that was kind of fun. Harrison and I flew out of Teterboro, and he'd be in his Beaver, and I'd be in the T6, and he'd be talking to Tower with that wonderful Harrison Ford voice, you know, that low voice, and I'd say, "Hey, Harrison, who's this?" "It's Treat. I'm in the T6 next to you." "Oh, hey, Treat. Oh, cool airplane. That's the." And the last one, no, that's not the last, so many of these. So I have a friend who was a 777 pilot, and he had a T6, and we were flying him back from Chicago area, and we were gonna land in Cleveland, Ohio, which I love because it's on the lake. It's a lakefront airport. It's a great airport. And over the lake, we decided to do some aerobatics and also a little bit of fighting. So we were dogfighting for about 20, 30 minutes. He was winning, better pilot. And he said, "Hey, man, I'm really getting low on fuel. Just find us the nearest airplane. We'll get a gas before you get out." And I said, "Okay." And I pulled it up on the screen, and I went, "You know, all these airports have a C in front of them. What's this?" "Dude, we're over Canada." So we beelined it back to the States. We had been dogfighting over Canada, so I'm glad we didn't get shot down. Good Lord, so many things.
Different days that you didn't get an escort.
We might have, yeah, might have. Oh, and okay. Last thing. All right, we can move on to that's enough of the mistakes. I did tell you about
airport landings. How about that? How many of you had that you've been off the runway and unintentionally?
Only once. No, two. Not unintentionally. I'll tell you two. One was a friend of mine. I was between airplanes, and he said, "You want to take? I've got a Pacer, not a tri-Pacer, but a Pacer. Would you like to fly it back and keep it at Rutland for a while? You pay the insurance." And I said, "Okay, I'll pay for insurance, and I can use the plane." Lovely, lovely plane. But there was something wrong with the tail wheel. It was canting in such a way that when you push, you know, when you land a tail wheel airplane, you want to put all the weight on the tail wheel so that you have directional control. At least on the 6, it was that way because the gear is so narrow. And when I landed that airplane, if you didn't wheel land it and then ease the rear wheel down, the tail wheel, it was weird. If you put all weight on the tail, it would start to cant. So it would always go the opposite direction of the rudder that you pushed. So we were starting to veer off the runway to the left. I pushed right rudder, and we went off the runway completely to the left, luckily between the light stanchions, and so there was no event. And the last one, the only event that ever did any damage to an airplane in 10,000 hours of flying was when I was flying with my friend, the 747 captain, really good pilot, awesome pilot, and he said, let's go to my airport where I kept my 6 back east. It'd be really fun. And I said, okay. So we didn't do what I should have done. I was pilot in command. He wasn't, but he was a 777 pilot. And I thought he would have told me. What he didn't tell me was, not having flown over first, he said, just keep some power up because it's cold. You know, to keep some power up in the engine. I said, okay, I'll keep some power up. And about 2/3 down the runway was a line of trees, and the runway kept going another 1,000 feet, maybe 800 feet past the line of trees. I didn't know that. So we touched down hot with some power on, and it seemed like forever. And I saw those trees coming at me, and I just pulled and yanked on. I was on those brakes like nobody's ever been on brakes, on grass. And the T6 just slowly went boop, 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 and I mowed the lawn with the prop. That was and then he said, you know, we were sitting there, I shut it down, and we're sitting in the middle of the runway, or just off the runway, I guess. And he started to say something. He said, Tree, you know, I said, don't talk to me, okay? Just please leave the airplane. Leave me alone with my self-hate for about 10 minutes, and I'll be okay. So I had self-loathing, and then we sent it out to Sensenich. It was back in a couple of weeks. But that was the only event that I ever really had of any damage to an aircraft.
I'm going to call you on that one because you may not have been at the controls, but you did tell me that you've.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Okay, I forgot about that. That wasn't me. It was Superman's fault. So Chris Reeves says, "Hey, you want to go gliding with me? I'm gliding now a lot." I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go gliding with you." So we go out to Foxfield, I think it was called. We drove out to the desert, out past the valley, over the San Gabriels through Desert Airport, and we got, I can't remember the tow ride. Must have been towed by something strong. And it was a 2-person glider. He was all excited. We got towed up to 7,000 or 8,000 feet, whatever they tow you to. I don't know anything about gliders. I know they don't have engines. And so we started gliding, and we did some nice gliding, but there was no lift, there were no thermals. And so Chris and I are gliding. He says, "Okay, I think we've just no thermals today, so I'll just bring it back in again." So he brings it down on a high downwind, and then we turn base. And as we turn final, we're over a cornfield, and there's a cornfield and a road, and then there's the runway. And I thought to myself, this does not look good. This is not looking good. And as we came lower and lower, I said, this is really bad. We are not going to make the runway. And we hit the cornfield. We bounced on the corn. We bounced across the road, and then we hit the runway really hard, and the wings bent down about 10 or 15 degrees. And we came to a stop. And again, Chris was me now. He was silent. And I didn't say anything. And then finally, after about 5 minutes, I said, "Well, you put it on the numbers." He didn't appreciate that. But that was my only glider ride in my entire life. I said, okay, from now on, I'd like an engine. I'd like a propeller. This is not my thing. They're beautiful to watch. I mean, it's wonderful. But I think you have to have a whole nother skill set to do that, I think. Yeah.
They, from an outside standpoint, they scare the heck out of me because they're not always on the radio, and sometimes they're really hard to see. So I'm just always worried about hitting them. That's the biggest thing. But I've heard they make you one heck of a pilot.
Okay, you want to go to military?
Yes.
Okay. So
I want to ask you a quick question first.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a quick question first. You've listed a bunch of things. It seems to me that there's a lot of people in the actor community that are pilots. You listed a bunch of them, John Travolta and Harrison and this whole group. Did you find a lot of people that you came across? Chris, of course, in your last story.
Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Michael, who was on Star Trek, had a beautiful. He had I think it was a trainer, a beautiful jet trainer. Michael, he was the one all dressed up as a alien. I can't remember his last name. Nice guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, you come across people, and I've heard some people. I hear Tom, who I know, Tom Cruise. I hear he had P-51 for quite a while. I don't know if he still does. So obviously, and Tom is obviously a very good skydiver too. But I'm sorry, your question was,
I'm just curious who else you ended up meeting along the way in all of your work.
Well, there's this thing out. One of the things that was really exciting, I have to say, was I was inducted into what's called Living Legends of Aviation. And when I gave my speech, I said, I don't know what I'm being inducted for other than I love to fly as much as anybody else. I do love to fly. But John Travolta inducted me, and I was with astronauts and people that were so far ahead of me in anything aviation. And I thought, well, Treat, you got it because you love it so much and you've done 50 years. So, okay. I didn't do anything to change aviation, but I've tried to, to steer kids into it who had a penchant for it. But that I got to meet, some of the greatest aerobatic pilots. I got to meet Patty, and I got to meet, before he passed away, the great who flew the Shrike, Bob Hoover.
Mm.
Just people who've been to the moon. It was pretty extraordinary.
It is. It's an amazing event. I was there 2 weeks ago, and it was really, really amazing.
The event is really nice because it's to help kids, bring kids into aviation. So I think it's a good cause, and it was really an honor to be inducted into that. I thought, well, it's a little embarrassing because I haven't done anything, but I thought, well, you know what, Treat, you love to fly so much, maybe just for sticking around for 50 years.
So you were going to say military. That you've got.
Okay, so when I get invited, one of the little perks of being somewhat known, like a semi-known person, we got invited to fly on to the Nimitz aircraft carrier on the COD, which is the twin-engine delivery ship, basically. So we drove down. They gave us a whole talk, and we got into the COD. And it was pretty extraordinary because you're sitting facing aft in the airplane. And there are only 2 small porthole windows. So it's kind of like a coffin. It is a bizarre feeling. But it wasn't a bizarre feeling only because on the takeoff out of San Diego, it was a takeoff. It was nice, it's really good, strong. I don't know what they used, not a PT6, but it was something, powerful engine. And we flew out over the water, and then we were told we're about 10 minutes from landing. And we came in on a really cool approach. You could feel it, very steep. And then all of a sudden, like being thrown into a giant pillow. It was like, whew. And I went, oh, that's cool. I thought that would be really like violent or something. I said, that was really a cool feeling. And we got out, we spent 3 days aboard. And of course, Henry and I, my partner, were both very experienced pilots. And the other folks were really rich people who got on the boat somehow. So they were off, making speeches, and we were down below decks with all the F-18 pilots, and we were getting into the guts of the F-18. How does it work? What do you use? What are the avionics? How do you guys? What's it like when you go in for a dogfight? What's a dogfight really like? I mean, all of the stuff that we wanted to know about. So we hung out with the pilots the most of the time below decks, which was really, really cool. And we got to see everything. We got to see how they set the amount of pressure, compression for the takeoffs, for the cap takeoffs. And then after our 3rd day, we were told, okay, you're going to go back on the COD. And I thought, well, this is going to be really cool. And they put us in the airplane. And again, I'm sitting backwards. But the airplane is pointed forwards. And I got to tell you, I have never experienced anything so terrifying. First of all, you're not in control, which every pilot hates. And you see the guy counting down with his hand like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're sitting facing aft. When that thing hits, it's like somebody punched you in the chest as hard as they possibly could. And the other thing is you're hanging down at an angle where you say to yourself, we can't, your ears are back on the, your inner ear is back on the deck. And you say to yourself, I can't possibly be flying. That was 2.5 seconds. We're doing 110 knots. And we're at an angle of attack of possibly 25, 30 degrees. And I was like, this can't be possible. And then finally, your body kind of catches up. But you can't see out. You're in a pitch black, little place with so you're not watching any of this. You're just feeling it. It was all sensory. But I got to tell you, it was one of the most exciting 3 days of my life. It was really cool. Getting to know the ship that's really a floating city. This is prisons, movie theaters, restaurants. Pretty cool. That was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
And then the next one, which was great, was being invited to fly with the Blue Angels. And they were doing an air show, and I don't know how I got that. I don't know. And they were doing air show at Rochester. And that was, I think for me, because I've been flying old airplanes for a long time, and I've been flying, the T6, and my first airplane was a Cub. So my air flying goes back to airplanes built in 1946. And they gave you the whole drill about, what to do if you have to eject and how to eject and all that, which was kind of frightening, actually, because if I really have to do this, I'll be scared to death. And we were up over Lake Ontario. But before we left, I just did a walk around with him around the airplane. And what was astonishing is the aft section of the elevator, it's like razor thin. And you think to yourself, 100 years ago, people were still driving horses and carriages. And this extraordinary piece of equipment, which goes this fast and does all this, is now, I just can't believe that we've come this far in this short a time. And a really wonderful pilot was in front, and he said, how much flight time do you have? And I said, well, I stopped counting at about 10,000 hours. And he said, well, what do you got? I said, I got an T6. He said, you got a T6? You do aerobatics? I said, all the time. He said, it's your airplane. So we started the takeoff roll. I said, by the way, he was giving back all of the tower was giving all kinds of instructions, and he was repeating them back. And I said, where do you write that down? He says, right here. I write it here. I said, damn, you guys are sharp. And because they don't wear G suits. They don't want G suits. They use musculature. And
really?
Yeah, they don't wear G suits because if the G suit swells up, that could move your hand just enough to these guys are a Coca-Cola can apart on their wings. But we were flying in a formation. It was just me and him on a fun flight. And it was kind of a little bit of a hazy day, but he said, we're up to 10,000. We got a piece of airspace. And he said, it's all yours. I was like, oh my God. I was doing rolls and loops and Immelmans. And I was like, this is cool.
That's crazy.
Now,
you just got free reign of an F-18 Blue Angel.
F-18, it's all yours. Have fun. And after about 10 minutes, I said, well, that's about as cool as it gets. And that was pretty cool. I was doing, rolls right, rolls left. It's just, the thing is, the loop takes about 7 miles instead of half a mile on a 6, you do this loop at 6 at 160 knots, you're doing this one at 500. And then he said, okay, we're going to take it back in again. So we got set up to land, and he said, I'm going to come around overhead and do a 270. And then I want you to know that as I come in for the 270, I'm going to bank it hard, almost 90 degrees, and I'm going to ask you to hook. And hooking is you put your fingers under your because there is no nothing to keep the blood in your legs. You have to tighten all the muscles in your lower body, and you're supposed to go, like that. And so he said, and he says, I'm going to go red D, hit it. I said, okay. And he said, I'm going to bank tight, bring it around to final, and we'll put it down. I said, okay, cool. So he goes, I'm ready to hook. I got my muscles, what muscles I had. He goes, red D, hit it. And I go, ah! Next thing I know, I'm watching 1,000 foot markers coming under me. And I've got video of me in the back of the plane like this. Just in the helmet, just like this. He goes, hey, wasn't that cool? And I'm like, he just see me doing this. And finally, my head comes up, and I go, oh, man, I was out. I was out cold, man. So from the time he banked to the time we were at least a couple thousand feet down the runway, I was out cold. All the blood was gone.
Oh, my God. How many Gs do you think that was?
7.
Wow.
7 instantaneously. I had a couple experiences. I did my aerobatics in the 6 high, and once in a blue moon, if I got real steep on a loop and you pulled out, it's an extraordinary thing. If it's happening to you slowly, it's like a curtain is closing on your eyes. It just starts to close. And then when you release the back pressure, hopefully you're not too close to the ground, the curtain opens up. What it does, the first thing that happens is you lose your peripheral, and then eventually you go out. But in aerobatics, you have to build up to it. It takes a degree of. You watch these guys when you're seeing them videotape during aerobatics. It looks like somebody's beating the heck out of them. The strain on the face. It's not. Takes a lot out of you. It's tough on the body unless you build up the tolerance. I had no tolerance to a F-18 7G pull. So that was a little embarrassing.
How would you describe, so very few people could answer this question. So you've gone out, you've flown T6, a bunch of other planes, all sorts of things. When you first got handed the controls, when you were able to go through 10 minutes of flying the F-18, what's it like? What was it in any way predictable compared to what you were expecting? Like, was it hard? Was it easy?
I think the instantaneous response is probably the thing I would say was most surprising. You know, with the 6, there's mushiness. The controls are heavy. They're direct linkage. These things, the minute you move the stick, it's a part of you. You know, it does exactly what you think. You think it, and it's kind of like helicopter flying in a way. With a helicopter, you have to learn to really take all of your movements down to a minimum, particularly when you're starting out, because you tend to over control, especially in a hover. And you get to the point where you realize you just put your hand on your leg, and there's just almost no movement. You know, the less you move, the better the helicopter flies. Until you get into the, you know, the fancier stuff. But I think that was the most extraordinary thing, was the response was instantaneous to control inputs. You know, that was astonishing to me. And the speed. I mean, when we were in very moist air, and he said, "I'm going to take us up and get us really hot." And when he pulled, what happens is the compression of the air creates these moisture, you know, trails, these contrails of moisture out the wings, and it's just the coolest thing to look at. It was very exciting, I have to say. I've got pictures, and I've got the video of me passing out, which you know, I'll watch for laughs on occasion.
Do you think your experience flying helicopters made that an easier transition for you to actually? You mentioned doing all these maneuvers. You were able to do them.
Well, no, I think the practice. I had a wonderful aerobatic instructor named Randy Gagne in Los Angeles, who taught me all of my aerobatics, and I think they're all the same maneuvers. It's just that the inputs are different for the maneuvers, and I just found that, you know, if you wanted to roll an F-18, you don't want to take the stick and slam it all the way over. It's not the way it works, you know. On a 6, you got to help it, you know what I mean? And, you know, your nose is going to want to fall through, so you got to push when you're underneath. And there's a whole lot you have to do because you're helping the airplane. You're trading off airspeed. For, you know, you've got airspeed, which gives you energy, and you need to sort of take care of that energy. There was a guy, the ex-German pilot, that used to do this extraordinary. I think I saw him do it once. He would take a glider up, and he had smoke on the glider, and they would play this beautiful Mozart piece or something. And it was all energy management. It was all doing all kinds of aerobatics in the glider all the way down to the grass, which was one of the most beautiful things I ever saw on an airplane. Really gorgeous. I can't remember his name, but that was an extraordinary thing to see.
That's what Bob Hoover, of course, always used to do, is all the energy management. It's amazing.
Yeah, and what Bob was, you know, it was so great to meet him. That was really, really an honor to be in the same club he was in. I still can't believe that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, those guys, they were, you know, and they were doing it when it was much more dangerous too. So it's a great honor, and they took a lot of chances, and they were actually great fighter pilots too. Don't forget.
Oh, absolutely. Do you think that you think all students should get some aerobatic time? Do you think that's key to that?
I wouldn't call it aerobatic time, but I don't think you're going to have a thing where those guys, you know, they used to do a thing where they pushed the flaps out a little bit, and one flap came out and the other didn't, and the guy was aerobatic, and it was like a 727 or something, and he actually rolled it back level again to get it back. But had he not had aerobatics, he wouldn't have been able to roll it into. In the 6, we used to practice a cross-controlled landing at altitude, where I banked the airplane to the left, and then I'd push right rudder, and then we'd slow the airplane until it snap rolled on me, to teach me to if you fought the roll, you're going to crash. But if you went with the roll, you could actually roll it through. I never wanted to get in that position where I was flying a T6 that slow on base that I was going to snap roll it. But it was something Randy and I used to practice. I think what's more important is unusual attitudes is a very important thing, and maybe actually what's really helpful now, the glass cockpits, of course, have the arrows telling you which way to go, which way to pull or push. But I've read these articles about a guy in a citation, you know, flying out of Salt Lake. He seemed not to have instrument skills. I think one of the things too is not to depend on your autopilot so much. You should fly at least every other approach. Hand fly, it's more fun too. It's more challenging. But to hand fly the airplane on instruments is always a good idea, as much as you can. I think I enjoy it. Some guys are like, that autopilot goes on at 400 feet and doesn't come off until they're on final. That's not my idea of flying, you know. But some guys like to fly that way, and I don't judge them for it. I just think it's more fun to fly an airplane and say, hey, let me see what I can. And by the way, at 31,000 feet in a citation, you can't fly it as good as the autopilot can. You know, it's much more sensitive and much better at it than you are. But it's fun to try. You know, it's fun to try. But yeah, I actually really love the flying of the airplane. I love flying an approach, hand flying it, you know, the whole thing. Because we don't have, you know, we're not at my airport at Rutland, we're uncontrolled. So there's almost always a procedure turn involved. So it's a little bit more complex and it's all you. So you want to kind of go, if everything goes to heck in a handbasket, can I fly this down to the runway comfortably without any help? And you should be able to, otherwise. But yeah, and I also think, we talked about this the other day, I think that it would be great if every young pilot, if you had them put the foggles on during your check ride and say, okay, you're an IMC now, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Can you do a 180? Can you get yourself out of it? Can you talk to them and tell them you get yourself in IMC? I need a little help here, but you can hold heading and altitude while getting out of it. I think 3 or 4 hours of that would be a good idea too.
Yeah. You know what, I've always wanted or hoped that in areas like where we live, where you and I live up in the Northeast, and there's a lot of IMC time, if possible, it would be great if during a student's primary training they went up with an instructor in IMC and got to even not the hood and all this other stuff where they can cheat out the side, but actually see this is what it's like when you get stuck in the clouds.
Jamie Bull, my friend Jamie Bull, ended up flying a Gulfstream for years for a guy. Jamie and I would wait for the day that we had IMC out of Teterboro, and then we just go practice. And we were practicing dragging the needle, you know, in an NDB approach. And we were practicing NDBs, we were practicing ILSs, VOR approaches. We were flying a Cherokee 180 in the worst crap, Northeast crap you can think of. And you know what it's like here, you know. So by the time I got the rating, I was like, hey man, I can fly any of this stuff. And I had no autopilot. So everything was hand flown, you know, until I got the Seneca. And then I got that wonderful little device, and the right side of the panel was completely blank. I got a thing called a DME, and that made approaches a lot more fun, a lot safer. I have to say that was a pretty cool move forward when I got that in the Seneca.
You've done so much serious flying. How do you feel about the difference between when you were doing ADFs and no moving map and all of that and versus now with all the GPS approaches? And I mean, you've got great approaches up at Rutland.
Well, I had a conversation with Sully Sullenberger about this because he was flying a citation. I think it was the Mustang. He had a Mustang at his disposal, which I think everybody wanted to give him his airplane. And we were talking about it, and I said, you know, the thing is kind of interesting in the moving on to the glass clamp. He had probably had a glass cockpit long before I got in front of one, but it became a lot more work to set up an approach. I used to sort of think, if I was coming in from Rutland to Teterboro, okay, and I'm at, let's say, 7,000 feet, and they say, okay, descend and maintain 4,000, fly heading 090, vectors for the ILS to 24. Okay, all I had to do was turn the OBS knob to 240, you know, the 24, and I would set in, you know, I'd write down or whatever the altitude I was cleared to, and all I had to do was intercept the needles and fly the donut down. But now, you know, when you're cleared for a particular approach, there are 5 different kinds of GPS approaches you can make. You've got to make sure you know which one so you have to check which, you know, what are your minimums on the GPS. And they finally, actually, Garmin did one thing that was really great was, as you know, on the approach, there are waypoints. And when you punched in vectors to final, all the waypoints were blown out. So when approach or tower said to you, would you go to this direct or this waypoint, you had to go find it again and tune it in. And then you get busy and you're not flying the airplane anymore, you know? Right. So Garmin came up with this thing, when you get vectors to final now, all the waypoints in the approach are still there. So you can go to your flight plan page, punch it and go to it. Because it happened to me when I was flying a couple years ago down to my daughter's college down in Savannah, they had terrible fires about 3 years ago. And it was very, very sad. Some guy took off in a single, and he was behind it. He was being told there was a 737 at his 2 o'clock, and he said, "I'm in trouble. I can't see anything. I'm really in trouble here." And he was basically IFR. So they said to me, "Can you accept, a GPS approach?" And I said, "Oh, sure, yeah, But then they gave me a waypoint. I had pushed vectors to final because it was real close, and I just went. Well, I said, I'll just intercept the final approach course and hope they don't notice, because it was too late. It was too late to punch in, a waypoint. I said, guys, come on.
Oh,
RNAV, can you fly the RNAV? And I'm 3 minutes out from base. And I said, yeah, I can fly it, but give me a second here. But I think that was the thing, is that they were really, I found, even though we have all these wonderful, we have traffic avoidance now, we have terrain, there was something about only having, your six-pack and your ILS that focused you on the job at hand in a way where you didn't have a lot to do. I found that a bit of a learning curve when I went to a glass cockpit. And I don't know about you.
There's a certain amount of currency training that you need to have with all the equipment that we didn't used to have.
Yeah.
Our currency, you always had to be current, of course, with the regulations, but really being proficient seemed to require a little bit less with less options and with less technology.
During COVID, I have probably flown 200 approaches on this little thing right here, because Garmin has a wonderful 750 trainer, really wonderful. You can set where you are.
Same thing with Avidyne.
All the charts are in it, and if you want to fly approaches and you want to really do it, you can get on it and make yourself, give yourself a challenge. Mm-hmm. And so I find that was very helpful for me, because it was a learning curve to get off of my six-pack in my Chieftain.
Yeah. I think that's the good news, is that there are the simulators. Like I said, you fly Garmin, I've got Avidyne, and they both have simulators. Both are cockpits we can kind of reproduce, and it keeps you current. And you have to. You have to, because like you said, we're not in the world.
Then my partner, I put it, by the way, Treat, while you were gone, his wife passed away, and he needed something to make himself feel good. So what did he do? He put a TXI in and a Garmin 275. So now I got like a whole new panel, it's like, I think the biggest problem is you've got so many possibilities. Let's see, where do I put terrain? Where should I put traffic? Where do I put my, where can I've got now an HSI and it's just extraordinary, the stuff, and you have to figure out, where do you want your stuff to go, and what kind of approach. On a dark night, you might want terrain. Going into Teterboro, you want traffic. So it's an interesting. I have to say, I'm still giving myself much higher minimums on IFR flights into an airport. Not because I can't fly it, because I'm afraid if I'm given a quick, very, very fast changeover, I won't be quick enough with my navigation equipment to do it. And so they're not yelling at me at Teterboro, because you better do it fast down there in New York,
That's a really good point. I really do admire, I admire a lot about your flying and the things that you do, but I really, really do admire, though, that you keep these two really different airplanes, that you've got all this technology you're talking about on one hand in your twin, and then on the other hand, you're keeping your stick and rudder up with the Cub.
It's funny. I have so many friends who I think I'm going to impress the heck out of. I said, let's go down, let's go fly down to Bartha's Vineyard and get some good clam chowder at the Black Dog Cafe in town. Oh yeah, let's do that. And I file IFR, and we got some weather, and I'm cleared to 9,000. We're at 9, and they get all the clearances down, and we get back. And every time they say, Treat, I get the finger up, no, Treat, can we? And I'm talking to them. No, you hear that 7? You hear that 13966? That's me. You can't talk. Then I take them up to the Cub a couple weeks later, and we land, and they go, that was so great. It's so much more fun to fly with you in the Cub. And I say, why? It's just fine. They go, because we talked the whole time, and no, you didn't tell me to shut up. And it was just, we were just flying. It was so cool, looking at stuff. And they're not impressed by all that stuff at all. They really love the act of flying in a small plane. And I took Jamie up, my friend who got me both my ratings, my commercial and my instrument, and I took him up in the Cub, and he said, "Preet, that is the first time in 30 years I have gone 80 miles an hour in an airplane. My airplane doesn't leave the ground until it's doing 180 miles an hour. You know, we don't even rotate." He said, "I haven't gone 80 miles an hour in an airplane since I was 26 years old." And he said that was really cool. So yeah, I mean, there's just they're both completely different kinds of flying. I love instrument flying. I love being in the system, and I really, really love to fly the Cub. I can't wait to get in it on a nice day. You know,
It's a perfect combination.
It is, and I don't really feel any. You know, guys want to get the fast light jets and all that stuff. I don't need a big shot airplane. I really don't. And in fact, right now, with the panel I've got, the slower I'm going, the better I'm going to do, because I have time to figure stuff out. I still, you know, and I'm away 4 months a year. So I get back, I'm like, dang, rusty. Let's get back there. The flying is not the hard part. It's actually really just maneuvering through a lot of information available to you and knowing, you know, how to put in a hold, all that sort of stuff. That how often do I hold? Not very often. So you get rusty and you got to practice.
Yeah.
But I love practicing, so there you have it. You know, I love nothing more than I'll go up to the airport and fly 6 approaches, and that's a good day flying for me.
Well, I'm looking forward to flying with you. I know Ben wants to get up there with you in the Cub.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Fuel tank going in now. Fuel tank is, as we speak, the new fuel tank. After 71 years, it needed the new fuel tank. You know.
Yeah.
So.
I think you got your 71 years out of your tank. I think it paid for itself.
Yeah. Maybe not 71, 1946, maybe a little less. Just about, though. Just about. Maybe it was 70.
They knew how to build them back then. They
did. They're metal, though, so metal does deteriorate. But it's a great Cub, and eventually I'd like to really cherry it out and make it yellow and all that. But it flies beautifully, and it's really trimmed out nice, you know. I flew somebody's biplane last year up on the island, and he said, "You want the airplane?" I said, "Sure." I took the stick, and the thing was like, wanted to bank right. You know, I was like, you know, I think this thing actually could use a little bit of a trimming out. He says, "Yeah, we got to, you know, it's really hard because all the wires have to be, you know, retightened." And I said, "You might want to do that. You know, this wants to roll right." But it's a lot of fun. It's been fun to talk to you. A great honor. So.
Well, thank you so much. I know that you've got about a month, and then you're going to be scooting across the country and up north to Canada to be filming. I hope that when we get you back in the U.S. after that, maybe we'll have a chance to chat again. But it is just so wonderful having you on there.
That was fun. It's always fun talking to you. It's like we're just hanging out in the hangar.
Exactly.
You know? They're all lies. None of it's true.
All right. Well, Tree, thank you so much for joining us tonight on SocialFlight Live.
I hope your fans enjoyed it too.
Oh, no question about it. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, we'll see you.
And to all of you, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us here on SocialFlight Live. We will be off next week, off flying, so no show next week on Tuesday the 22nd. However, we are back on March 1st, Tuesday, March 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with Barry and Brian Schiff. It's going to be so much fun because we are going to talk about all sorts of flying technique issues, some really interesting things, stuff that's been written about recently, and a variety of different topics. And I can tell you, it's fascinating to learn from both of these amazing educators and pilots. And so be sure to be back on March 1st for that show. On Tuesday, March 8th, Nicole Malachowski, U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds pilot, former Thunderbirds pilot, will be joining us again here on the show, talk about some new things and some really fascinating work that she has done with the WASPs, etc. And on Tuesday, March 15th, we are here with Mike Kennedy of Airplane Repo. So with that, again, thank you so much for taking time for joining us here on SocialFlight Live. Check out socialflight.com, the free SocialFlight mobile app, and I wish you all blue skies.